So here we are with the second half of making the honeysuckle bow and arrow set. Um, we're going into the arrow now, of course. We need a stick to shoot out of our bendy stick. So, arrows are in a lot of ways a little bit more time consuming than bows in the long run. You make a bow and it can last you a week, 2 weeks, a couple months, a year, a couple years. It can last you your lifetime. It can last generations. The arrows, on the other hand, you're constantly making them. You're constantly shooting them, losing them. You get better at taking shots that are gonna hit your target, and you get better at hitting what you're aiming for, basically. But you're constantly making new arrows. So the important part about arrows, I guess the most important, that the rule of thumb that I try to follow is, don't spend too much time on arrows. You make something that's functional. You make a stick that is straight, that can take the poundage of the bow, and will deliver a penetrating point into an animal, and hopefully get your meat. Anyway, so we'll just go into basically what I'm doing right now. Cut a straight stick, as straight as possible. You're not going to find the straightest sticks. You're not going to find perfectly straight sticks unless you look for a really long time, depending on, and it's also conducive to the environment that you're in. Sometimes, just around where I'm at, basically, I got a lot of honeysuckle, just a ton of honeysuckle, and they do have straight sections, but for the most part, you're just going to be left with sections with slight bends in them. But realistically, again, it's pretty easy to get the bends out. As you can see right now, making a green arrow shaft. So I haven't seasoned it, so it's still a bit flexible. So you sight down it, like looking down the rifle barrel. You see which places are not straight, and then you bend them so they're straight. You can see where my legs now. You can put it diagonal along your leg and get a much wider bend. If you don't have but if you have like a really direct or a really tight bend in one area, maybe a couple inches, then you can just do it on the perpendicular to your leg. So it's putting more of the pressure on a smaller surface area. Anyway, that roll test back there, as long as your arrow rolls, it's pretty good, straight enough. And right here, I'm just making arrowheads, wood arrowheads. Wood, I don't have nappable materials around here. The creek's frozen over. Even if it wasn't frozen over, there's not very much flint or anything to really work to make a point. You have to travel really far. It's in Ohio, but if I'm just like sitting here walking around and I need an arrow, I'm not gonna walk 100 miles to go get some nappable materials. Anyway, wood and bone can work just as effectively, if you know how to use them, and if you make them sharp enough. The main part is the penetrating point. You don't need a really wide arrowhead. Oh yeah, there's some deer. And you don't need a really wide arrowhead. You just kind of want an arrowhead that'll go deep into the animal. So a sharp one, at least on the tip. And you can do that with bone or wood. It just takes a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice. But if you can do it, the materials are everywhere at all times of the year. Like wood and bone, pretty easy to find. Wood especially. And then there's some really hardwood points. So anyway, flatter, wider arrowheads, they don't go as deep, but they do more cutting. Skinnier arrowheads, but with a sharp point, they'll penetrate deeper, but they won't necessarily lacerate or cut the sides or open up the wound as much. They'll just go deep. So if you hit the heart of the lungs, then it works. Like you're basically creating a strong penetrating point. Now you can wonder about just sharpening the tip of the arrow shaft itself, which you can do, just as easy, a little bit easier than this whole process of going through right now. I'm like wrapping the right below where I'm going to be hafting the arrowhead with dog bane. I got to make it really tight, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the shaft, and I'm going to insert it, carve a little bit off the side so that it's a little bit more flush, and then wrap it right up. You can notch many different ways. The actual split the shaft method is not preferred by people because it splits the shaft and splits rundown easier. Whereas instead of notching it, where there's a couple ways to notch it, where you basically make a an insert that has a flat bottom at the base of it, instead of just sending the knife right through, just how I'm doing now. But the common problem, if you do it the way that I'm doing it right now, is that the split will continue running down the shaft. But if you wrap your dog bane tight enough, which it doesn't need that much pressure, it's not going to go down very deep. And then especially, or it's not going to run down the split. Split's not going to go anywhere. And especially if you have, once you wrap the fibers all the way up the arrowhead, and if you go pretty deep, like right there, that little insert that I popped out, is kind of I kind of split it, half inserted it. What I did there is I cut 2 little grooves on the side and then ran 2 splits down and popped the little section out. But anyway, so as you can see right here, it'll scoot up a little bit. There's the arrowhead in there. It's inserted in the notch. Now I'm going to flush it out, because obviously you don't want a big ass bulky section right where the arrowhead meets the shaft, because it's going to stop right there or dramatically slow it down. So just thin that off just enough that you have enough wood that it's not going to snap off. And so basically, I'm working on this. I'll wrap it up, tie it off, pretty basic. Again, back to the arrowhead thing. What's really important is that the tip is really sharp, and and that it provides a little bit of weight in the front, is a second-hand thing. When your arrow shaft is flying, if you're skimping on the fletching materials, for the drag in the back, you can actually get your arrow to fly a little bit straighter by having just more weight in the front. The reason that an arrow flies straight due to the fletching is the fletching causes drag in the back, constantly straightening out the shaft as it's flying. And it creates streamlined drag, especially, is the most important factor with those feathers. But if you don't have feathers, you can add a little bit more weight to the front of the shaft. Maybe you have a really dense hardwood, maybe 6-inch long point, not a wide point like the one here. Maybe keep the point just about as wide as the shaft itself, but it actually just comes down to a very dense, very hard, very sharp point. And you can use, there's a lot of hardwoods that'll go in just fine. You can use a lot of hardwoods for awls, punching holes through leather. We got Osage around here, especially in the Midwest. We got Osage and locusts and hickories and oaks, and they can all work pretty well as hardwood points and hardwood tools. So anyway, as you can see here, wrapping it up, and then you can tie it off. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm just jamming the end down to the little hollow section of Honeysuckle. And yeah, anyway, this that's the arrowhead and the shaft and everything, basically. So I'll stop this and go do fletching clip. But you can see how strong it is. You want to make sure it's strong. If it's not strong, then it's not worth shooting it. So make sure the hafting's tight before you try it out. Anyway, all right, 1 second.